So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to the last of this little group of wintry sieges that Tommy sent me. And this is another cityscape map which has been in the game for a little while at this point. This is MINAS FALATH, which is kind of interesting as a cityscape goes because it does have quite a lot of interior choke points to what you would call as, well, the quote-unquote city section, the defensible bit, but it's more like the keep at the back, and the actual settlement is in the area that's already occupied by most of the attackers. But a lot of this map is based, of course, around these bridges that lead to the central keep, and the actual final stand can vary a little bit because it rather depends on what areas of the map the attackers are actually making progress through. But there's plenty of opportunity for the defenders to salvage a losing situation on this map as well. It's not as if as soon as they lose in one location things start to fall apart pretty quickly, so they do have options from that perspective. We have a combination of Rhun, Gondor and Numenor on the defence, but let's see what we've got on the attack. Starting off with Hidden, who is playing as the Rhovanion, a nicely well-balanced force. The heavier units I think are going to be key in the initial stages just because of the way that the map is laid out. The Rhovanion archers should be able to trade back and forth decently well, albeit the Gondorians in particular have a very strong heavy archer force that can outnumber them, so we'll see how that goes. The tribal units, as ever, going to be the primary damage dealing vector for the Rhovanion. The skirmishes here being the javelin variant, though the lower armour does mean they will make relatively easy prey for the defensive line, and particularly defending archers if they're able to focus them down even with those shields. But the tribal levy slingers as well, surprisingly strong in terms of the damage they can deal over longer periods of time. The Rhovanion hoplons just in behind here as well. Good heavy spears with the phalanx. I mean, this is obviously going to be the central pillar of any sort of sustained attack that the Rhovanion try to make. And then of course there's the tribal berserkers as well, which in terms of dealing damage going to be very important, especially against the Gondorians and the Numenorians, because the armour piercing that they bring to the table is a bit of a must against those factions once they're dug in. And the Rhovanion nobles over here as well. Nice bodyguard unit to keep the general safe. More tribal berserkers. Also, this is where the general is. Again, the saber-tooth riders. Pretty much every time we've seen the Rhovanion in the last few battles, they have had the saber-tooth riders, and I think that's because of the sheer damage they can do off the charge and the fact that their hit points mean they can keep themselves alive for a decent length of time, but once they are gone, they can melt away pretty quickly, and they are very expensive as well. And finally, we have the Rhovanion chariot, which is a bit of an addition here. And this marks pretty much the first. I mean, every chariot has got pretty much every type of ranged weapon, and that is doubly true now, because you can see that some of these guys have got slings on the back. So again, maybe the base damage is more of a problem in a unit like this, but as with any chariot unit, the main event really is going to be their ability to barge through defensive lines. Ding Ducking is playing as Mirkwood. Obviously the elves, when they're on the attack in a situation like this, do need to lean on their allies' numbers a little bit, generally, especially a force like Mirkwood, who aren't blessed with the most staying power in their units. The Hiriak, the best exceptions to that rule, really, especially when they have the upgrade here because of that big shield value and because of how solid they are in melee as well. But there are only so many of them, and they are still pretty expensive. But of course, in a situation like this, especially on a map where there isn't a great deal of hard cover for the defenders, you can try and punish them a little bit with your ranged power, and that's something Mirkwood are certainly not lacking in. Some upgraded Hiripang, and then the Elven King's Guard as well, with those two-handed axes that they wield in melee. We've got some Elder Palace Guard in and amongst the Hiri Lang, so all of the very damaging Mirkwood units are on display here, with all the armour upgrades as well. So there's probably not that much more of the Mirkwood army here, because of how expensive all of these units are when you upgrade the armour, but there will be a few units hidden away that we can't quite see just yet. Way in the backfield we have another map where the hobbits are present. We've got Nuke, who has got the Proudfoot Protectors as his general, which is understandable. Obviously, again, range power, we already mentioned how useful that can be. You can see where the hidden units are going to be, but the skin changers have no such luxury. Very potent unit of monstrous infantry, which for attackers in a situation like this, very, very useful to have indeed. And then some Shire Guard and some battling Brandybucks as well. The Shire Guard, probably the most regular unit that the Shire have, and it's their new addition as well. The fourth attacking army over here, we have Harad, who's played by fries and rice, and we've got some Muhard Berserkers and some dismounted Serpent Guards, so more numbers to go with what the Hobbits and the Rhovanion can bring. Obviously the Muhards in general are not going to be great when it comes to wading into arrow fire, which could be a problem. That's the great trade-off as Harad. Generally speaking, most of the units you're armour piercing, or factions that you're armour piercing, is really good against are also factions that have got access to good units of archers, so simultaneously strong and weak against them, and Gondor perhaps the best example of that. Got some dismounted Serpent Guard as well, more Trollmen of Harad, and then we've got the dismounted Serpent Guard, more Berserkers, so plenty of repeated units here. Beast Hunters at the back, we've got some Champions of Nafarat and the Demon, so all of the Trollmen, plenty of Muhards, more of a damage focused army perhaps, but still highly numerous. And finally, on the attack we have Dunland, played by Johnny, certainly a numbers focused force. This is, again, artillery could be very useful on this map as well because of its more open nature, so Dunland going to try and take advantage of that with the catapult. Double dipping on the Ravenborn Wardens is easier to do with a faction like Dunland because you're not necessarily splurging on your mainline infantry, and the crossbows could prove to be a real match winner, especially when used in conjunction with the Proudfoots, and the mounted version of them is here as well. Dunish Warband adding to the slings that we've already seen from the Rhovanion, albeit the Dunish Warband are a little bit more well suited for melee combat than the Tribals are. And then we've got some Uruk-hai Raiders as well, and again Dunland, a bit of a theme perhaps, but it's another faction where much of their army can hide, so there is going to be more to the Dunlanders than meets the eye there. So Tommy, the player who sent me this battle replay, so a big thank you to him, is playing as Numenor. I mean, certainly not lacking when it comes to quality on the front line are Numenor. Belagaya footmen fully upgraded, not necessarily the most damaging, but very, very solid when it comes to holding a line. Similar story really with the Belagaya archers when they're fully upgraded like this. Trading back and forth against most of the attacking archers though, they should be just fine. More of them, and then the Ardenheim shadow bows as well to add to that damage. Of course, missile units do need to be used fairly sparingly as the defenders. You need to make good decisions with where your ammunition goes. Numenorian shield guard, of course, much more damaging than the Belagaya footmen. They fight alongside, but also far more expensive, but this is the trade-off. Naranaru Sentinels for a pike centre. We've got the Numenorian cohort here at the back, very damaging unit of line infantry. Even for the cost, they add a little bit more in terms of their damage. Pharazim Swordmasters, that's where the general's going to be, the most damaging unit of infantry that Numenor can field. We've got the Lords of Anadune, that is a unit of sort of anti-cavalry really, because they're javelin cavalry. We'll see how much freedom they get on the field, considering the situation is what it is. Cohort, the Royal Legion of Armenelos, very strong unit of sword and board infantry there as well, and more cohorts. So that's the entirety of the Numenor army. The rest is going to be a bit of a grace period, I'm sure, because Rhun, their deployment zone, starts them outside of the defensive position, and we've got Mevin playing as them, bringing a little bit more armour piercing to the fold than Gondor and Numenor can bring on their own. Plenty of flag rim, this gives them a really solid base as well. They may not have quite the same finesse as something like the Numenorian cohort, but the armour piercing is certainly a boost. Golden Raiders as well, they've brought their own chariots, so certainly an answer to some of the units that Dunland and the Rhovanion have brought. Looks like they've got 2 units of the Wain Riders. I mean, that is a bold move, because if chariots go poorly for you, they can melt away very quickly and they're very expensive, so we'll see how well the Wain Riders do. Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, plenty of Scion Rim, and then the Carmel's Chosen here at the back as well. There could be a few hidden units for Rhun also with their Shadow Guard units. And finally, last but not least, we have Winged Swordsman 44 playing as Gondor, plenty of Gondor spearmen. We've got the Vanguard of King Elisar in there as well, with, you can actually see the general. The lack of a helmet does actually really stand out in the Gondorian roster. So the Gondor spearmen, we've got the Nimlothian Honor Guard in there as well. The Ithelian Rangers hidden in and amongst these units as well. Fountain Guard, Citadel Guard. Nothing too surprising in a 5v3 considering the quality that you can bring. The Gondorians obviously going to go pretty heavy on their archers, the standard archers. We've also got the Lords of Gondor, so a decent cavalry presence from both sides, and varied mounted units as well. So interested to see who gets the better of that engagement. In terms of quality, you would say it's probably actually the defenders, but they're going to need to, considering the amount of money they've invested here. Guards of Osgiliath, and a Trebuchet, of course, which on a map like this can be absolutely devastating. It'll want to steer clear of Dunland's catapult, but that is way on the other side of the battlefield, so they might have just lucked out there. As I mentioned, we are going to be making a little bit of a cut, because Rhun will have to get into defensive shape, and the attackers have got to march through the occupied villages as well, so we will rejoin when the battle is about to get underway. a slightly earlier start to proceedings than I was expecting, but this is a good example really of the increased range that the elves can possess and just out of reach of the Gondor archers' reprisal. Although Gondor could move forward and engage in a bit of a back and forth with the elves if they desired. Even the fully upgraded Gondor archers will not particularly enjoy being on the receiving end of those damaging elven arrows. From an attacking perspective, being able to get good use out of your elven missiles is going to be one of the driving forces behind at least this side of the attack, you would feel. That extra damage that the elves can do, and the fact that being bogged down in a back and forth is one of the things you can do to reduce that effectiveness, but for the time being Gondor does not seem to be interested in doing that. Relying instead on their armour, a bit of damage being done to those Athelian rangers now as well. I mean, not devastating of course, but the upshot of this is it's basically free damage for Mirkwood, and then they can use those units in melee a little bit later on. Similar story over here, albeit looks as though the Gondor archers did take the occasional pot shot at the forming Rhovanion archers. A little bit more similar to what Gondor focused their own archers on. A bit more defensively orientated. They also have to get a little bit closer, of course, so there is no real doubt that they will be in range of the Gondorians, and indeed already starting to fire at the armoured archers. I feel like this is going to be a relatively slow beginning, just trying to set themselves appropriately. You can see over there as well, actually, a nice position for the Hashari Stalkers to take up, trying to attack into some of the formed up runic units in the middle. Hashari Stalkers, of course, being rangers, that's going to be big damage. Again, the problem for them would be if they started to take a bit of arrow fire in return, but no danger of that for the time being from Rhun, unless they move some of their own archers forwards. The Shire is here, starting to make their way across, abandoning this initial little plateau to the attackers, but it does give them a little bit more of a consolidated feel. They won't be completely cut off either, because they can take the long way around as long as Gondor remains steadfast. If Gondor loses that position, then a lot of these runic units could end up trapped, so that's one of the considerations that the defenders will have to make if things start to get a little bit hairy for them. The Lords, Dunland slowly shifting their way forwards. Let's continue to do that. 2 units of the Hashari Stalkers as well. Decent damage. Some of the units of Flag Rim, decently armoured, but if the shields are not pointing in the right direction, the Hashari will do some pretty hefty damage to them. The archers reshifting themselves just a little bit. Yeah, we're still very much in the stacking up phase, which is why I was a little bit surprised actually that things got underway as quickly as they did, but just a little bit of pressure being applied by the attackers at range. Testing the waters and how eager Gondor were to return fire, which for the time being not really so much. Rhovanion Hoplon's now moving forward as well, so we may get the first of the melee engagements as well as they form. Tribal Levy Slingers, valuable support. I mean, obviously the Gondorian frontline will fairly easily withstand individual units such as this, especially the Rhovanions' main infantry. They're really just there to be tough to kill rather than rack up an impressive kill count of their own. I mean, I suppose Rhun have to put up a defence over here, otherwise Gondor would have a flank of their own to worry about. And at that point you may as well just retreat back to the outer island. Some of these middle defensive positions are too good to pass up, really. Skin changes will be a real concern as well. As we saw in the last battle replay, as much as the Shire were not able to see their team over the line, the skin changes did a lot of damage to a Gondorian army, no less. There's still the fact of those very numerous chariots that Rhun have as well. Tribal Levy Slingers taking some hits on the approach. 2 units of archers actually firing away at them. I mean, that's all well and good, but I mean, they're not the most expensive unit. They do fall into that category of relatively cheap thrown projectile units, where even if you end up just taking a load of damage with them, in a 5v3 like this, I think they'll be perfectly happy with that. Problem is, if you leave them to their own devices, they will still do a good amount of damage and Going to be tough to get to them in melee now, with the Hoplons forming up a shield wall in front of them. Pen over there also. Rhovanion archers flanking them, but for the time being the elves the only ones really getting involved, taking those pot shots into the Gondorian positions. Another unit. The skin changes over here. Didn't see the Entwives in the Mirkwood roster, but that would be an interesting combination. Both good aligned monstrous infantry units clashing with the defensive lines. Tribal Levy Slingers have taken an awful lot of damage, of course, but also absorbed an awful lot of that ammunition. One of the most valuable resources for a defending army. So is this going to prove to be a good idea or not? Skin Changers moving in, and I mean, the only thing here really is the Gondor Spearmen, and they are going to be poorly equipped to deal with monstrous infantry. That Spear Malice is really going to bite them here. So they're going to need some slightly more serious units, I think. The Lothian Honor Guard are right there. It would be significantly more serious. I'm a little surprised that the Hoplons are not moving forward in support. Still really testing the waters more than anything else. The Lords of Gondor get a good charge into monstrous infantry is another way that you can deal with them, but the Skin Changers do see that coming, and they're going to shift themselves backwards in short order. Sling bullets being utilised. Our archers still firing away at them. More ammunition to be utilised there. Dunish Warband. This is perhaps one of the more difficult angles you can attack the settlement from. It does mean that you can deny the defenders potentially the opportunity for a final stand on the outer island if you make good progress, but you've got to fight uphill into a good defensive position, into one of the areas on the map where the defenders can set up their skirmishes in the most advantageous positions. Not only that, but as Dunland you're going up against a very high quality force in Numenor and a relatively narrow choke, so you'd have to lean very heavily on your supporting units if you're going to have any success back here. The outer reaches. Things quietening down a little bit. Gondor archers. The Great Eagles, I completely missed them even though they were flying through the air. What a thing to miss. I mean, charging into them is bold, the spears, because obviously they do have that anti-cavalry bonus, but the example of the extremely high charge bonus that the Great Eagles have there is they really did a huge amount of damage onto the Gondor spearmen, who've already had to put up with the attention of the Skin Changers as well. They did take a few losses though there, the Great Eagles, but as the attackers, unlike last time, the Shire will be freer to use those kinds of units more aggressively and not worry quite so much about reckless casualties. Huge amount of movement from those archers now either, but Gondor feeling the pressure, you would suggest. Certainly there's a lot of these tribal units that have been killed by the Gondor archers, but in terms of importance of units, I would definitely place this fight in favour of the attackers, especially when you consider the amount of dead Athenian rangers there. Direct result of the Hiri Pen doing their thing, firing now into the Lords of Gondor as well. This is one of the better examples of that elven range being used to really good effect that we've seen in a while. Meanwhile, Harad and the Shire moving forward to test Rhun's metal in melee as well, and again the Skin Changers side-swiping fire from the Shari Stalkers, so a bad day for these Flag Rim. Support of all of those numbers as well. Serpent Guard no slouches in melee. But Belagair archers trying to use fire arrows to rout some units off. I thought the Hobbit train arms were there, but that isn't true. The Runic infantry is going to need some shoring up, and I mean the problem here is they've done a good job so far, the attackers, of really utilising their long range to support or just to poke and prod at the enemy. Lords of Anadune charging into the Dunish warband there in the background, so Numenor taking an active role in trying to stymie the damage that's being done. A combination of entry-level shock troops and high-end monstrous infantry means that you're going to be doing a lot of damage to whatever you face up against. Danish warband in support as well, so you can see some slings as well. But as we said, Rhun can't afford to retreat from this location, otherwise Gondor will have to retreat from theirs. The domino effect would well and truly start if that was the case. Mechanical clank of crossbows and the Golden Raiders trying to do their thing. I mean, presumably trying to go after the skin changers. There's nothing else in here that would warrant the attention of, again, what could be an extremely important thing. Ammunition resource. Flag rim firing away. I mean, I think the chariots, the Wain Riders, using their ammunition, I mean, individually those arrows are very damaging because there's less of them. So this could be an effective use, and then later on use them as the battering ram they're intended to be used as. Until then, free damage, but now attacking artillery. Dunland catapult, managing to hit the Golden Raiders. Again, glancing blows only. They can scarcely miss, but based on the way that Rhun are set up here, it's also going to be quite difficult for them to get really telling hits. I mean, maybe right into the middle of the chariots might be the most efficient use of that ammunition. Another unit of flag rim being committed to the front line now. Real movement in the backfield yet. Skin changers thinking about moving forward once again. Warband on station. A good example of the defenders doing what the attackers have done so well thus far as well, using the chasmous gaps in between these plateaus to set up their archers in a good position to fire. Alligator archers not the most damaging, but from this position just a little bit of support will be the important thing. So the flag rim can continue to do the thing, but again, 2 units of the Shire stalkers is a lot. That was a pretty good shot from the catapult as well, through several lines of the Scion rim and hitting the Shadow Guard as well. We'll have to rethink. Still no real movement over here just yet in terms of melee. Gondor archers trading back and forth. Again, going after the slingers once more. A second unit of slingers that have been moved forward. But again, how much ammunition? Gondor are pouring into these entry-level units. The Rhovanion, this must be intentional at this point. And then later they'll have less to deal with very, very dangerous elven units, which would be the best use of the ammunition for Gondor, I think. Using all of their units of archers for that cause anyway is probably something that I wouldn't have recommended, but we'll see how it pans out for them. I mean, the flag rim with their armour piercing. See, monstrous infantry is a little bit of a weird one. Shock infantry tends to be the best way to deal with them. Doing a decent job at holding on so far, considering the nice kick there from the skin changer, but doing a decent job at hanging on in pretty grim circumstances. The stalkers have been firing for quite a while, so they may have used up much of their ammo. Rhun will definitely be hoping that is the case. Alligator archers ceasing activities for the time being, perhaps thinking that they're okay in melee for the moment. Vanderbrass archers still firing away. The fresh unit of dismounted Serpent Guard arriving now as well. Another unit of infantry. I mean, the Carmel's Shadow Guard would be the play, I think. They'll definitely be more capable of dealing damage to the skin changers. Shoring things up a little bit. They'll need infantry on the front line anyway, with 200 fresh combatants just arriving from Harad. Raiders thinking of moving in as well. As soon as that second unit of infantry arrives, however, that is the cue for the Belagire to start firing away again. Again, glancing blows from the trebuchet only. Still, direct hits may very well be enough to rout off wings of this attack, and that's where the defenders can start to claw back some value. Belagire archers, effectively the front line. Dunland thinking about moving forwards. See there, one unit of the Danish warband. That's the only thing that's made its way this far across, and you can see here right away their exposed nature going to be taken advantage of by the Lords of Anadune. Again, the Dunlanders do have anti-cavalry bonuses across their roster in general, but obviously they're not going to be as extreme as regular spears or pikes. It's a nice to have, but it's not the sort of thing that you can expect them to take charges from some of the heaviest cavalry in the game and get away with it when they're light infantry at best. Belagire footmen on the move move forward as well. Danish warband shaken, in real danger of being routed off here. Further back, Northern shield guard, Ardenheim shadow bows as well, perched on that hilltop. More hits from the trebuchet by the looks of things. Decent patches of kills, but not on anything too significant once again. And this is where playing the long game for the attackers could really pay dividends, because if they run out of ranged support here, the defenders, then it's asking an awful lot of their infantry to be able to outlast the numbers discrepancy that they are going to be put under. Arrows streaking through the air once again, Shire Stalkers. Oof. A bit of friendly fire there, I think. Enough to rout off the very depleted hobbits, but Serpent Guard still shaken. They will stabilise as well. Both sides using their artillery pieces to affect this engagement, which is to the detriment of both sides' infantry at this point, but Rhun have got less in the tank than the attackers have, so long term you'd imagine the attackers will get the upper hand here. Fire arrows. If it was in conjunction with that artillery shot, maybe the Serpent Guard would have fled, but for the time being, perfectly happy to stay in melee. Golden Raiders as well, still firing. The unit of the Flag Rim. I mean, Rhun did have a few units in reserve over here, and I think they are sending forward more and more. Whether it turns out to be a bit of a casualty pit for them remains to be seen. Gondor archers moving forward into melee, which is not a great sign. It means they've used up all their ammunition. I mean, plenty of kills here, but it wasn't just one unit of archers that was getting involved there. So finally, the hoplons have been stood in the way of all of these slingers getting a little test in melee, but they'll be pretty comfortable against out of ammo skirmishes. Gondor archers still. Good use so far of these tribal units. Still, I mean, stuff like the veterans of Osgiliath, I mean, they are a defensive archer by nature, so the amount of damage they can do isn't going to be as extreme as maybe you would like, but it does all add up. Also in melee, they can be a real tour de force as well, a second hit point, locked morale. Be a real linchpin kind of unit should the need arise. They are out of ammunition now. Will they be committed forward? They would be enough to give the hoplons real pause. Have to wait and see. Plenty of reinforcements just in behind at the back end of this little plateau, or main plateau really, of MINAS FALATH. Carmel's shadow bows on the high ground. What are they firing at? Yeah, so they're trying to affect the infantry engagement rather than getting involved in a back and forth with the Harad archers over there, who also are doing the same. A few poison arrows being floated in. What remains of this Harad force has been routed off, but the skin changers are back. Some Danish warband in tow. So the pressure continues. Raiders just in behind as well. Barbarian Catapult trying to arc a few shots to the Numenorians in the backfield, getting a good hit actually on those Balagar archers. Fortuitous indeed, and getting also some kills on the Royal Legion and Numenorian Shield Guard. Not a ton, but still, that's lucky hits that they will graciously accept. Now the Numenorian steel bows. Damage can be done. The Ravenborn Wardens, the target of that, obviously bodyguard tier units in melee and crossbows at range, so a good use of armor-piercing arrows, but they're going to be forced to retreat by the skin changers and the Urukai. Which means they can continue to do their thing. And for both sides this has been pretty costly at this point, but it's something the attackers will be far more comfortable with doing than the defenders, I think. Shadows now, are they taking hits? I would be surprised if they weren't, and indeed they are. Serpent archers will be far more at home in this kind of engagement as well, so it'll be interesting to see if Mevin keeps his shadow bows here long term. Shire Stalker's on the way across as well, so yeah, they're going to have to leave or try and trade, but I don't think that would necessarily be the best of ideas. Well, the depleted Gondor Spearmen and Gondor Archers, with all of that armour packed on, are going to last a while in melee against the Hoplons, but their fate is well and truly sealed, really. And Elven King's Guard. Loitering within 10. Depleted Gondor Archers. They do have more reinforcements that they can bring in, try to levy skirmishes. I mean, the Javelins are more capable of dealing damage a little bit more quickly. More akin to the kind of units which we're used to seeing be effective on the attack. Getting a little bit closer. I mean, again, they're attracting the attention of the Gondorian skirmishers, but again, from Hidden's perspective, I don't think he will mind too much about that. Shadowbow's trying to get into a position, I think, where the high ground means they can shoot into the Haradrim, but the Haradrim can't fire back, which is savvy. But if they move forward just a little bit, it means that Harad can skirmish with them once again, so they'll be eager to make sure that that does not happen. Danish Warband alone. And this attack is in a little bit of danger of fizzling out. Reinforcements a little bit too far away, perhaps. Maybe the Trebuchet, the fear of the Trebuchet, is what caused that. Again, Dunland sending a single unit of infantry forward here, which doesn't really have too much chance of, or any chance really, of making any inroads against Numenor, so again, maybe 2 free unit kills here for the defenders. Not against elite units by any means, but again, that's the sort of thing which can add up come the end of the game. Balagaya Footman and the higher tier Numenorian Shield Guard won't be taking too much damage at the hands of these raiders either. Still, Dunland's appetite to attack down that route, not particularly high. Balagaya Archers and Ardenheim Shadowbows in good positions as well. A few more fire arrows overhead. Shire back into melee as well. A unit known for its longevity, really, so the fact they've got another round of combat in them is a good sign. The victory seems certain for the Danish Warband here. That must be a result of the Serpent Guard being freshly arrived. A few arrows finding their marks as well. High Raiders making their way forwards as well. Fresh units on them, although that other unit easily dealt with by the Numenorians. There's not a limitless amount of reinforcements the attackers have, in all fairness. But you get the sense if they really committed a full-blown attack to this bit of the runic defence, it would fold, and that would likely start a bit of a chain reaction. For the time being, still content to take the patient approach. Grim shifting their way forwards as well. Shadowbows. Elven King's Guard taking a few more pot shots as well. And if they're not careful here, the Gondorian Trebuchet will get set alight. We saw that in the last siege as well on Grimslade, where a Trebuchet went completely to waste because they was able to be burnt by, at that point, the Imladris archers. We're seeing now more of a general advance. Gondorian weakness has been smelled, perhaps. There, the Grey Eagles getting in amongst things. Not only the Rhovanion, but Mirkwood also moving forward. They'll really put Gondor under the cosh in melee as well. The Gondorian plate will be earning every bit of its keep here to try and keep them alive. Osgiliath will be a bit of a concern for Mirkwood, though they don't have an equivalent of their own, of course. Vanguard and King Elisar as well, forcing the Rhovikin archers back. And also the small matter now with the Trebuchet support, so Gondor have rolled forward with a lot of their strength now, as they have needed to. Then a good opportunity as well, perhaps, for a little bit more value for stuff like the slingers and the elven archers, as Gondor are forced into more of an active fight. Not really a charge there as they bump into the back of their own units. The Wain Riders also now being used as chariots are intended to, and the Hiriek of Mirkwood, elves on the verge of routing. That's how you know the chariots are doing their job. Artillery support as well, so this attack could fall apart really. Gondorians have responded well to the pressure. Although there goes the general, charged by the Great Eagles, never stood a chance. That is maybe a concern. I mean, Gondor's morale is decent, but it's not limitless, so it's the sort of thing which, come the late game again, that could prove to be a pretty pivotal moment. Especially if Gondor continue to get put under this kind of pressure. Wain Riders having already done their job against Mirkwood, so they have forced the attackers back to their original positions. Not without cost, but the defenders will be pretty pleased by that. And that is the story really. I think the attackers have done good damage to the defenders, damage they'll be happy with, but in terms of how well their attacks have been sustained and map control, they actually haven't really moved since the opening salvos. Broken units as well. Flag Rhun will be able to finish off. Maybe a little bit more attention being paid to Numenor on the back island now. Uruk-hai Raiders in melee again. This time at least they do have the support of a unit of Dunwich Warman, but it's not substantial enough, and that's what I'd say. Like, the slow approach served the attackers well early on, but there was a moment, I think, where they should have started to turn up the volume a little bit, and they haven't done that. They're continuing to stick to their guns, and as a result, the quality of the defenders is being allowed to shine through a little bit more. Wain Riders. Trebuchet still alive as well, so maybe the elven ammunition supply is also running a little lower than they would like. Citadel Guard as well. Strong unit of javelins involved in pushing them back, and now going to try and use as much of their ammo as they can. Good choice of target hoplons as well because of that armour of theirs. Also, the Citadel Guard's presence in melee might be required, so dumping the ammunition and just getting what kills you can might be the play. That is indeed what's happened. Not really much for a charge there, unfortunately, for the Great Eagles, and it's going to end poorly for them in melee against the Citadel Guard as well. And the Trebuchet continuing to put the pressure on as well. Round Axeman, Rhovanion Hoplons, the recipient of that Trebuchet boulder. Also some follow-through kills as well on the Tribal Levy Slingers. Gondorian Trebuchet crew, of course, not as effective as their fellow Numenorians in melee, but that extra artillery piece can make a real difference to the amount of damage they can chuck out in one volley. Speaking of artillery though, Dunland arcing their shots long range to try and attack the advancing Numenorians, managing to get, again, glancing blows, but nothing really telling. Numenorian Shield Guard rolling forward. Again, a massive amount of friendly fire that from the catapult, so as much as they got lucky with the Balagai archers early on, that is the duality of artillery. And the Uruk-hai Raiders will rout in short order against the Numenorian infantry now, surely. They stabilised, actually, weirdly enough. The initial shock has gone, but the slower burn of being skewered by the Numenor spears is going to be more of a concern. So they do still have the support of the warband in behind them, but I think that's where the Numenorian cavalry is going to come in. Skin changes, though. That'll be something the Lords of Anadune don't want to get too involved with. Plenty of slings. This sort of pincer attack could be enough to do really significant damage to the Shield Guard. Just a little bit again. Dunland not moving up around this way. I think the way that you normally see this kind of battle divided is 2 and 2 on the main routes, and then one slowly pressuring to try and take the shortcut to the final stand, if that's how the map is set up. But Dunland not fancying their chances against Numenor there. And a little bit more mix and match, which can be a good thing for the attackers, blending their strengths, as long as they do so in numbers. I mean, one unit of Muhard Berserkers, damaging enough to cause a problem, but they'll fizzle out very, very quickly if they don't have support. Especially if there's any sort of arrow fire that is committed to this location. Which, of course, immediately from the Balagaya it is. Not the most damaging archer, but you really don't need to be against a unit like the Muhard Berserkers. Defeat seems set for the flag run because there's so few of them, but yeah, trying to get as much value as you can out of these kinds of units is exactly what the defenders need to be doing now, considering how the battle seems to be developing. Skin changes still there, Lords of Anaduna managing to dodge the skin changes and get a hit on those warband. I don't know how much ammunition Numenor still have left, but we'll see. Scion Rim, the most solid unit of infantry defensively that Rhun have. They don't even need to be the most damaging against the Muhard Berserkers either, but against the skin changes they will struggle. Continuing to be a thorn in the defender's side. More units starting to push forwards now, and a lot of them Harad. Single file line Trollman. That will be a significant addition to the front line. Damaging, but also reasonably robust because of their multiple HP. Heart and soul of any good Harad army, really. But will their lowlier units still be alive for the Trollmen to support when they get there? Muhard Beast Hunters. Balagaya archers as well. Further back. Still the Wayne Riders content to use that ammunition. Good way to get value with them. See if they can have another decisive moment, just as they did to help mop up the initial attack. Rhovanion and Mirkwood over here. Citadel Guard moving forwards. Not going to allow the Hoplons to get away. I mean, the Citadel Guard are the more impressive unit, but the Hoplons are pretty much double their number, so I don't necessarily know how well this engagement is going to go for them. Spearmen. A lot of these units. Dragon's Wrath crossbows in support as well. That's a big amount of damage that can be done in a relatively short space of time. Going after the Rhovanion phalanx, again another good choice. Deny them that long weaponry, especially seeing as you know Merc would have none of that. If you can domineer that side of the engagement, that can be really important going into the final phases of battles. Wayne Riders firing away. Shadowbows out of ammunition, which is a good sign because they were under ranged pressure at one point, so if they were able to get all their ammunition downrange, that's good. Used as a infantry unit as well, with the melee defense that rangers often have. Having said that, unlikely to save them against the skin changers, who have really done the business against the Scion Rim as we expected. A lot of damage, or a lot of fire arrows being committed to the direction of the Trollmen. I mean, they do have shields, but armor values very poor, so as soon as those hit points are gone, they will start to die pretty fast, so Harad have moved them forward. It may be in their best interest to get them into melee as quickly as possible now. Five skin changes. Forward come the chariots now that the skin changes are no longer there, trying to roll their way through. Decent amount of damage being done there, but a few of them getting bogged down and killed as a result. The classic fate of chariots, really. Then Shire Stalkers. Are moving forward. A couple of them have fallen, but hit points for the most part enough to allow them to weather that pressure that they were under. I mean, certainly the Trollmen will be the best kind of unit that Harad have for dealing with the Numenorian heavies. Cohort moving forward, I mean, fresh Numenorian cohort, they will do very, very well against the Muhards, and in fact they won't do too badly against the Trollmen, relatively speaking, because of the damage they can dish out. You can still back the Trollmen, but it's one of the better units of heavy line infantry that can face off against the Trollmen, if not the best from the Western Kingdoms, well, human kingdoms generally, I should say, southern island nation, perhaps, would be the best way to put it. Valagire archers over there now. Getting some rear shots in over here. Bit of support. The javelins of Harad going after the shadow bows. More damaging of the two. A second unit of Carmul's shadow bows as well. So plenty of ranger support. Still some units over there from the Shire and Dunland who could put the pressure on, which means Numenor always have to marshal that location accordingly. Firing at point blank is bold, but I mean they're more likely to get kills that way. Because even if they pull out their melee weaponry, they're going up against some of the better Numenorian units. The support for the Trollmen would probably be appreciated by them, but now they're being pulled off the front line. I've seen the damage that they're taking, and now the Trollmen alone. With the arrow fire support, the Trollmen will lose this engagement, so choices are going to have to be made now. Fresh unit of Scion Rim. Without the skin changes here, they'll be able to hold the line adequately against the Serpent Guard, especially again with the close support. Wayne Riders doing their thing. There's a few units of Flag Rim that can still be committed over here, so despite the early pressure, I have to say Rhun have done really rather well, especially considering the fact that they've also been fighting on other fronts. Gondorians, again, it's been... Other than that one attack that the Rhovanion and Mirkwood committed forward, which ultimately ended in failure, this has definitely been a case of two sides trying to get the better end of trading. Again, that's really the only thing that you can judge come the end of the battle. It's a risky thing as well to get involved with. Less so for the attackers. It's generally a winning strategy for the attackers in a 5v3, but when you do make your moves, you have to make sure that they stick, and that last one over here did not for them. Time will tell. Serpent archers moving forwards, still those Wayne Riders going after some slightly more expensive units, getting as much value as they can before they presumably try another charge. And the commitment of funds to those chariots is going to be one of the defining things for the defenders. Nevin's patience has been good so far, I think, with regards to using them. Shire Stalkers out of ammunition being committed to melee now. Slingers this time from the Hobbits, the Longbottom mob. Another one. I mean, Slingers are one of the rarer unit types in the game. There are plenty of examples of them on display today for the attackers. The Rhovanion, the Shire and Dunland all have access to them. Ravenborn Warden's a little bit closer now, taking some point blank hits. Again, the attacking artillery trying to bank those shots. Valagire archers being used now to help shore things up alongside the regular Numenorian units. Beast hunters again. I mean, there have been numerous examples of the attackers allowing individual units, not necessarily of the highest quality, but essentially allowing them to fight in engagements they have no chance in and ultimately perishing. And that's the sort of thing which, come the late game, you can find that you don't necessarily have the kind of numbers advantage that you were hoping for. Danish Warband as well. Serpent Archers. Going after the Lords of Anadune, but Serpent Archers again an example of a unit which is not necessarily the most damaging. And the poison projectiles are certainly not going to be enough to rout off a unit of that quality. Some ruffians moving forward from Dunland, so still plenty of throwing projectile support that the attackers can call upon to make the defenders just that little bit more uncomfortable. Belagara archers as well. Rhun in terms of what they can still commit to this front line. I mean, they've still got Carmel's Chosen, still got another unit of reasonably healthy Flag Rim and Chariots, but if it really came down to that, they might have to call upon some extra support from the Gondorians, which surely would be the dinner bell for the Rhovanion and Mirkwood to have another go. It may very well come down to that, or a general retreat to the rear island. Those are going to be long-term the options that the defenders have open to them. Still more of a bits and pieces kind of engagement over there. I mean, I suppose Mirkwood do have less in reserve than other attacking armies, so committing forward to another attack such as the one we saw here would probably be the last time they were able to do that, so timing is going to be key. We'll see. Still over here where the bloodiest engagement continues to take place. Remains of both sides now very depleted, but another unit of Uruk-hai Raiders on the way forward to keep the attack going. That's all it is. It's not really designed to push the enemy back. I think what the attackers are hoping for is that ultimately the defenders start to fall away because of the casualties they're taking long term at the hands of their support units in behind the infantry that they're committing. Just keeping them engaged in melee for the time being. Brandy Bucks just in behind as well. Another mobilisation at back there. Ruffians on bottom mob revealing themselves once more, as do the Ruffians. I mean, the fresh unit of Scion Rim without any sort of support would easily be enough to hold the Uruk-hai Raiders at bay, of course, but necessarily going to be true. Especially, I mean, the Ravenborn Wardens in particular, they'll do damage quickly. Late game as well, their quality in melee could prove to be quite decisive depending on how that goes. Over here, Numenor still understandably very comfortable in melee. Combination of the more functional Balagar units with the more damaging regular Numenorians. Easy enough task to take down a unit of Dunish Warband in melee, although they are peeling an awful lot of units off this engagement now. Interesting call. Units always take casualties when they turn their back on the enemy, even if against a unit as lowly as the Warband. Relatively lowly, I suppose. Berserkers. Finding a gap around the back, but another unit that was in reserve that was hidden is a fresh unit of Shadow Guard as well. Good damage. Taking a lot of damage on the approach, however, from the Ruffians. A little bit more of a serious attack coming now from the attackers. And certainly with the champions of Nafrat and all of the numbers at their centre, this is going to be the moment where Rhun are going to need to be ready. Maybe the Gondorians send a unit or two across to support. The Flag Rim and the Carmel's Chosen will need to be immobilised now. Those Carmel Shadow Bows being pursued by this unit of Muhard Berserkers, which managed to circumvent the defensive line. And this is where a bit of chaos could be caused. And a chariot falling. Golden Raiders on the way across, as well as the Lords of Gondor. Surely this is the time for the Rhovanion and Mirkwood to move forward as well. There are units moving around, but nothing too wholesale yet. Berserkers. Shire as well. And the Carmel's Chosen. Getting into melee, I mean that quality will be appreciated, I'm sure. Trade pretty poorly with the champions of Nafrat, mind you, so it is going to come down to how much support they can get into place, but the attackers are also doing a good job there. Muhard Beast Hunters managing to fire directly into the supporting Balagar archers. Would come the Ravenborn Wardens as well, so I think now the attackers do see that this could be the moment where they could take the bull by the horns in this battle. hailstorm of javelins there. Wardens still firing away as well. The regular Shire. Difficult unit to use, but again, that damage could be absolutely vital. The champions of Nafra have gone in behind enemy lines as well, so they have taken advantage of that gap there, and Rhun not quick enough in terms of closing it. Numenorian cohort on the way across, as well as the Sapphire Bladesmen, so they do have units that can respond adequately to this, but it's just whether the shape of the engagement is going to be good for them or not. And the Demons of the Desert absolutely need to be dealt with very quickly, because if they get some good shots into the runic front line, it's going to devastate them. Got Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen up there now. Gondor not necessarily needing that support any longer. If anything, it's the other way round, like I said. Chariots crunching into the Shire, doing a good amount of damage as well. Certainly disrupting them as well from being able to use those throwing projectiles of theirs. Speaking of which, Sapphire Bladesmen also. Oof. Getting knocked over. I think that must be a result of the Demons of the Desert. So over here, I mean, to be fair, a counter-attack onto this central island here, moving forwards. So I mean, this was a big commitment of resources from the attackers, and the defenders are responding in kind. They're not going to rest on their laurels and have a contingency of falling back. They're instead going to use all the units that were on that outer island and try and punish the attackers for moving forward. And I mean, they will do so, because a lot of these units are skirmishes, which are going to be no match at all for stuff like the Numenorian cohort. The Ravenborn Wardens are an exception to that, but this is a good move from the defenders, I think. I like it. Couple shadow bows in melee. Still a little bit of range support as well that they do still have a bit of ammunition for. Ruffians. Melee against the Carmel's chosen, but skin changes are nearby. The Trollman class units are nearby. Really, really heavy duty and damaging units, which are going to be tough to stop. Sapphire Bladesmen are going to win out over there, but they're going to get engaged surely by more units as well. Over here, meanwhile, that unit of... well, there was a unit of tribal berserkers actually that have made their way through over here as well, and there are the Entwives, so they were on the field. More monstrous infantry, more tough targets for the defenders to have to try and take down, but the Fountain Guard are well suited for doing so. In fact, some of them getting killed. In fact, a couple of Entwives and a couple of skin changes killed in that one volley there. Again, another example of artillery really threading the needle in this battle. And the Fountain Guard, if anything, will be able to deal with the situation over here. Vanguard of King Alisar and Nimlothian Honor Guard, so all of Gondor's quality. So they are attacking now over here, but once again being forced back, even with the monstrous infantry. So a good sign for the defenders, because it means they won't be under extreme pressure from two sides, at least map pressure. Gondor may end up losing ground to those monsters over the long haul, but it's really still over here. Champions of Nafra still doing the business against Rhun and Numenor there. They're going to need a bit of help from the Rangers and the Sapphire Bladesmen. But chaos reigns over here, and it's to the benefit of the defenders, you would suggest. I mean, the Beastmen of Dunland are a little bit different. They are not a helpless skirmisher unit in melee. They are a berserker class unit, one of the best examples of it as well. Moving forward to face the Pharazim Swordmaster in melee, which is a closer fight than you might expect. I think if it was purely even, the Pharazim would win out because of the huge damage they can do as a two-handed swordsman. But with supporting units all around, the waters are very much muddied there. Barbarian Catapult in melee as well. Spears drawn, the half-orc Axe Guard. Mounted units, I mean the Lords of Anadune don't want to be stuck around here for too long, although the Royal Legion of Armenelos are kind of isolated as well. Trying to go after those throwing axes though is understandable, considering the kind of damage that they can chuck out. Northern Shield Guard may be overextending a little bit. And Proudfoot protects as well, another unit of crossbows. It seems like the attackers always have another ace up their sleeve. Skin changes Shire and also the Dunedain Rangers of the Shire. More Numenorian reinforcements including Aru Sentinels, Shadow Bows, Steel Bows. I mean, there's no danger of a flanking force anymore, so you may as well send all of your units that you've got over there to the middle, because otherwise you're going to end up losing ground. Cardinal Shadow Bows continuing to go after some of the softer targets and take away some of the numbers the attackers still have. Numenorian cohort, a fresh unit of them, engaging with the Shire Guard, who probably won't last too much longer considering the kind of foe they're up against. Sapphire Bladesmen as well. I mean, considering the damage the champions of Nafra have taken at this point, Sapphire Bladesmen could get themselves over the line against this unit, and if that happens, I don't know, defenders looking pretty good at that point. And now, in a broken field kind of situation, this is where surely the Wain Riders can come into their own. The chariots have already been effective in this battle, I think, but this is the moment where they could really justify having two of them. The Dunland General falls, and that's exactly the sort of thing, especially in conjunction with a chariot charge, which could result in some routing. Chariots want to steer clear of the Shire Guard, causing havoc, and pretty much able to secure this the side of this plateau, which would allow attacking reinforcements to move forward. Ranger versus Ranger, but the Ardenniam are far more numerous. Chariots again, ruffians easily routing, combination of chariots and high tier pikes. Maybe jumping off the cliff would be a higher possibility of survival there. Long bottom mobs suffering the same, so you have to say the chariots, regardless of how this game goes from here, I think the chariots have proven to be a very, very useful addition. A risky call, but one that I think has paid off. The Harad General falls. And I mean, at this point, in terms of map control, we are heading towards the final 10k frames, but I think the attackers are actually running out of options here. I think the time where they could have moved forward super aggressively on all fronts and won the battle is probably past, and Gondor still standing firm over here. The Entwives and the Skin Changers will be a concern, but they do have the Rhovanion Nobles to worry about as well. But the Midlothians, the Vanguard, that both sides have now suffered egregious friendly fire, although I think that is probably more significant than what the catapult did earlier. Numenor General killed at the hands of slings. Now the Saber-Tooth Riders. In fact, that friendly fire might be enough to give the attackers the gap they need, because a lot of those kills were on Fountain Guard. And Fountain Guard are the best unit really to be utilised against the Saber-Tooths, against the Entwives, against the Skin Changers. And now Gondor are in trouble. Rangers are over here as well. Shire's General falls. Generals falling left and right, so morale will become more and more of a concern. I mean, the Trebuchet crew is a spear unit, so the Saber-Tooth Rider is not necessarily the be-all and end-all. More Athelian Rangers, the Lords of Gondor, charging into the Skin Changers, that will be enough to do the business. Looking like a good performance from the Rhovanion Nobles to be a bit of a linchpin to force their way around the Gondorian defensive line. Lung, many slingers as well. More reinforcements for the attackers to test Gondor's longevity. Problem for the attackers might be is if the defenders are outright victorious over here, Gondor will eventually receive reinforcements. Things are very much in the balance. 2 Skin Changers remain in and amongst some of the Numenorians. Charges. Those Dunish warband and routing them off. Yeah, I mean, Balagar footmen flanking around now as well. The defenders will be outright victorious if it comes down to sheer brutish strength. Steel bows getting into melee with the Hobbitry in arms. Sapphire Bladesman as well. Good performance from them up against the champions of Nafrat. Bloodied, admittedly, but if they weren't present, then Harad might have been able to do more damage. Javelins definitely playing their part. Dragon's Wrath crossbows, so all of the runic high-end skirmishes, proving their worth in melee as well. Ardenheim Shadow bows probably won't beat the Ravenborn Wardens here, but they are at least engaging them, keeping them locked down, giving time for them to secure some ground in behind them. Surely they're going to rout pretty quickly here, the Hobbitry and Arms, the loss of the General, utterly surrounded by vastly superior troops. Sterner stuff for the time being. Now the Naranaru Sentinels being the frontline force. It's going to be a very difficult unit for the attackers to break down, regardless of how things go over on the other side. Yeah, victory is going to be theirs. And then over here, the way things were looking, I think the attackers were going to be able to overcome Gondor. Zelda Royal Council and Palace Guard yet to be committed. So yeah, they will be victorious over here, the attackers, but not with a huge amount left. Mirkwood going to be the healthiest of the attacking armies left standing, you would suggest. A little bit of support from the Rhovanion as well. Still 4 skin changers up and about. Heavy slingers as well. The Trebuchet crew back over here once more. Lords of Gondor, 1 Entwife. Is the Trebuchet going to be able to fire? I kind of doubt it. But it is something else which the attackers will need to deal with before moving over to the other side to try and deal. And they started to fire, but it's going to be too late. Saber-tooth Riders in there now. And they'll flee before the spears can engage in any form of reprisal. Carnage. The evidence of a battle fought. The Rhovanion chariot. I mean, something I'd completely forgotten about, of course, given the performance of the runic chariots, but the Rhovanion ones over here as well. What they will have is they can try and charge in, but as soon as they so much as brush up against the Naranaru Sentinels, they're going to get eviscerated. They're the routing Proudfoot Protectors, so victorious over on this side, but again, it's kind of a similar story for Numenor and Rhun over here as it is for the Rhovanion and Mirkwood on the other side. They're pretty battered and bruised at this point. I think in terms of sheer high-end units, because Mirkwood have still got their elder units, they're going to have the edge, but then Numenor do have those Sentinels. The Pikes could prove to be the truly decisive factor. Any sort of damage Gondor can inflict on the attackers over on this side still would be greatly appreciated, I'm sure, but I'm pretty sure that Gondor have been utterly vanquished at this point. How important that friendly fire from the Trebuchet could prove to be come the end of the battle. Those monstrous units are a problem though as well. That's where the Pikes will come undone potentially. Lords of Gondor still being a nuisance. Move, the Palace Guard, Elven King's Guard with 29, but the Palace Guard still completely healthy at 63. And a tremendous all-rounder of a unit they are. Victory for the attackers over here. Saber-tooth Riders and the Chariot, of course. This is where now the Rhovanion with the only active chariots could give Rhun a taste of their own medicine. Wrath crossbows, Naranaru Sentinels. Other guy footmen being the rear guard against the chariots, but this is where the slow burn of all of that slinger damage could come into play. Trying to respond in time with some steel bows. They're going to do damage to the Ardenheim Shadowbows here, but they're kind of caught. They are going to take damage as a result of this. Will the spears be able to get into close melee quickly enough? Getting rid of the chariot isn't the sort of thing which will guarantee victory for the defenders by any means, but they do need to get rid of it because we've already seen how effective they can be, and especially seeing as the defenders don't have the most in terms of manpower at this point. Be a tough one. Sentinels. Off goes the chariot. Cohort as well. Slowly making their way forwards. A bit of high ground over here. I don't think they have any sort of ammunition left to them, but yeah, it's going to come down to whether or not that elven quality is going to be enough, or whether or not positioning and pikes from Numenor will be the match-winning thing. I mean, they're definitely going to have to form up an organised defence here, because mobility is definitely in favour of the attackers now, between the Sabertooths and the chariots. Able to pick off some of these stragglers. Pikes moving forwards. Sentinels. The ploy here is obvious. I mean, the defenders have every right to do this as well. The onus is on the attackers to move forward, so... And the defenders have been aggressive at moments in this battle as well. Palace Guard forming up, but again, it's those pikes. Still a fresh unit of Balagire footmen as well, and only one chariot remains, so... The spears and the stragglers over there from Numenor can be committed as reinforcements as well. And given the fact they have been able to form up this defence, I'd kind of back the defenders to see themselves over the line now. Because I don't think there's much Mirkwood can really do other than attack into them. They don't have any ranged support anymore because they had to use all of it earlier on, and we saw them use it against regular Gondor archers as well, so as much as I was concerned about maybe the defenders being the ones to use their ammunition unwisely, in the end, maybe the attackers will live to regret that more than their opponents. Sabertooth Raven is still trying to deal with some of these extras, and will be successful in doing so. The thing is, the only other unit they've got over here would be the Balagire footmen who are spears, so it'll be more difficult to do the business against them. And the decisive engagement begins. That must be Gondor, the Lords of Gondor. Yes, indeed. Skin Changers being the decisive unit there. Numenor forcing the issue against the elves. Will be the pikes. I mean, probably the Dragon's Wrath crossbows in melee would be useful as well. The Elder Royal Council is still completely healthy also, so outlasting. They're going to need to have those pikes to guard against the Sabertooth Riders. 106 Balagire footmen moving forwards as it's shaken though. I mean, the loss of the Numenor general could prove to be a boon yet. Nobles, I mean, surely this side is going to be a more significant one, although the Elder Royal Council have been peeled off this front line. Fresh unit of Hiri Lang as well. Reinforcements arrive. Skin Changers. Sabertooth Riders with a charge could, of course, blow this battle wide open, but the positioning of Numenor is still good. Having said that, just about able to face their spears in the right direction, but wavering as they are, I don't know how much longer the freshly returned footmen are going to last. Now just merely shaken. That's surprising, because that must be Mirkwood, so this is half of Mirkwood's army. A small force, but will the quality be enough? The announcer still backs Mirkwood because of that quality. Multiple HP units can skew things a bit, however, and the Sabertooth Riders and Skin Changers are also still alive, who have copious hit points. Palace Guard still. No, Irish Sentinel's a little bit thin on the ground now. Things very much on a razor's edge now. Footman trying to face the Sabertooth Riders where they can, but the big problem here now is the fact that the pikes have moved forwards, and that means the Sabertooth Riders have got a free charge in there, which I think might be the moment things fall away for the defenders. They don't have anything that's damaging enough to deal with the kind of punishment that the Riders and most of the Elven units that are still alive can chuck out. It was always going to come down to whether or not they could maintain that formation, and I don't think that's going to be the case. Especially Skin Changers moving in. There may only be two of them, but that's exactly the sort of thing you want to be seeing against a unit of strong pikes. The Royal Council as well, still nice and healthy. Charge there, just bumping in. If they can squeeze through there, that would surely be the end of things. The Runic General falls. Rhun don't have that much left. Units they do have are not going to rout as a result of the General dying immediately. Palace Guard forcing their way around. They took some damage in this engagement, as you would expect, against the level of Numenorians that were here, but ultimately displaying their superiority once more. Very closely fought battle, this one, though. I was hoping the defenders would pull it off, considering how good that counter-attack over onto this plateau was, but again, it was a battle of fine margins. Both sides saw the real benefits and downsides of their artillery as well. More severe, I think, for the defenders, though, was that trebuchet hit on the Fountain Guard. Both sides maybe could have been a little bit more efficient with their ammo, but can't really argue with the results that either side got. Some elite units from both sides did very little, but others have been very, very important. Similar, really. It's always an uphill battle as the defenders in a 5v3. And this was a very valiant effort indeed. I mean, in terms of the differences, yeah, 3% seems about right. Elven quality. To be fair, the slow approach from the elves definitely the way to go. Especially given their composition, because they don't really do too well when you just throw them into the meat grinder in a siege like this. But late game, if you can conserve your quality with them, as we've seen here from Ding, they can really be the thing which sees you over the line. Because if it weren't the elves and their quality, I don't think the attackers would have won this. I think, you know, the defenders would have had enough left in the tank to be able to hold on and wall up. As it is, second battle in a row where I think we're going to see a narrow attacker victory, which in the early days of this new version of the game, the defenders were winning an awful lot, so it's about time the attackers went on a bit of a winning streak. And there we have it. Still those still there. Rhun gone. The last fleeing man trampled by the riders. Numenor the last one standing, but not for too much longer. Sabertooth ones look kind of strange, don't they? They're definitely repurposed wargs. But there we have it. All that the attackers have left is within view. And other than the riders, it's all elves. 1% in the end was the difference, so not too much more and they would have had it, but there you go. You can see there as well the elves, noticeably the smallest of the attacking armies. but it proved to be the right call on this occasion. Interesting compositions as well. I think the chariots for Rhun actually proved to be a good thing. If anything, I think it was mostly, to turn things around in the late game. Again, that trebuchet shot, you can't really, plan for that sort of thing. But Gondor would have done more damage to the attackers moving through if they still had that fountain guard there. It would have certainly been helpful against the monstrous units. Again, considering the shape of the engagement, I think the attackers still would have won, but would those casualties then have been enough to the point where the elves couldn't force their way through? That Numenorian phalanx, we'll never know now. But both sides suffered from that sort of thing in the end, and I think it was a very closely fought battle, and either side winning would have been justified, I think. Let's see what did the damage for Numenor anyway. 693 on the Lords of Anadune, so very good use of the cavalry from Tommy, which for a defending force, if you do invest heavily in cavalry, you do need to use it well. The same thing can be said of chariots. We won't see what did the damage for the runic chariots, but we'll just have to guess. Shield Guard, some of them did very poorly, some of them did extremely well. All things balance out, I suppose. It seems like a bit of a trend, actually. Some of the cohort doing pretty badly, some of them doing very well. Belagai Footmen overperforming, underperforming. Naru Aru Sentinels about what you'd expect considering they were committed later on. Good from all of the skirmishes, of course. And the Pharazim Swordmasters, considering the kind of foes they were up against, did very well also. So, there we have it. The final one of the 3 wintry sieges that Tommy sent me over the holiday period. And actually Nuke in this battle has also sent me a couple which we will be looking at as well. Got one also from Colonel Speaks 46, so still got a few sieges to go through, though of course more is always welcome, although now that we're doing one per week, or mixing in the faction overviews as well, the chances of running out are lower, but certainly not impossible, so we'll just see how things go. But more like this would be ideal, of course. This was a very, very high quality game indeed. Big thank you to Tommy and all of the players for being a part of this battle replay. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.